Hello, everyone. Welcome to xyzpodcast. I'm Gary. Happy Sunday, and I'm glad to have Eevon to join me today as a co-host. Eevon is currently a student in AA. Also, I thought to invite her to talk about housing. I believe that we both share the same concern and also interest in housing issue. Especially, we hope that how can we bring that in and apply that kind of knowledge into Malaysia. Of course, Queenie also part of the team that we are kind of working on it. I mean, even though we're not sure what's the outcome, but we are pretty much optimistic about it. And it just so happened that because I know Queenie from Discord, and in fact we haven't met each other before. Same goes to Eevon,
Yes.
but I think that's the power of virtual meetings, and also somehow I have done like so far all the podcasts is not really maybe one or two is on in physical basis, but other than that, it's all Zoom. So welcome Queenie and Eevon. Thanks a lot for joining. And a brief introduction about Queenie. Queenie is an architectural designer based in KL, with a very interesting background and also portfolio, working in Shanghai or Hong Kong, and study in TU Delft. And the reason why I thought to invite Queenie is to talk about not just about housing, of course, it's not, apart from her thesis or her interest, her assignment on housing. The final project is located in Mumbai. But apart from that, she also did other things, the so-called other ways of doing architecture. She teaches in MIA. The design studio is very interesting as well. It's called Domesticity, Conservation and Community. And if not mistaken, the one I joined the Creed session before. Another lecturer is called Victor, right? Victor Wolf.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
That was another studio. That was
That
the
was another
previous
studio.
semester. Yeah.
Okay. So I joined that one, and I find it very interesting as well. Even though it's interior architecture, but I somehow found a lot of common points from what we have been through architectural course. At the same time, later on we will talk about duduk rumah artists, time to rise, and perhaps Q design is part of the duduk rumah artists. So without further ado, hi everyone, welcome. And how are you
Hi.
guys doing?
Good, good.
Okay. Maybe let's start off like talk about why architecture, and because earlier before this podcast we did talk a little bit about like you growing up in KL, and it's very surprised that how I'm very surprised how did you ended up in Hong Kong to do you did your degree there, right? And after that your
Yep.
master's in TU Delft,
Yep.
and then from Hong Kong that's where you know Clarissa. And is there any particular why you study architecture in Hong Kong uni, you know?
Well, I went to Zhonghua Duzhong, so I took my UAC, and then for one reason I chose architecture is actually because my high school was an environment where they put a lot of emphasis on like maths and physics, and I felt like I had enough of that. I kind of want to break away from that, and then I also there was also this one art class where it's just one assignment where we were asked to draw a 2-point perspective of your dream room, and then that kind of made me feel like, wow, it's actually really like I was fascinated by the fact that you can actually create your own space when you draw a drawing, and then that made me want to pursue something that is related. Yeah, and then with a UEC degree, actually, they usually point you to Asian countries. So my choice at that time was like Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, and Singapore. And yeah, so I applied to a few universities and I ended up in Hong Kong.
So it's a binding program. So it's somehow linked to the.
It wasn't binded, but Hong Kong U came to our high school and offered a scholarship opportunity. And then internally within the school, we kind of did a few rounds of interviews, and then I took that opportunity to go to Hong Kong.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So is that I mean, before that, have you visited Hong Kong, and then do you have any idea like what was the expectation about Hong Kong?
Before that, I like as a kid, I think I've went once, but it was more like a touristy kind of experience, so it was nothing close to reality. I watched a lot of Hong Kong dramas growing up and Hong Kong movies, so that kind of helped.
Right.
Yeah.
So you studied there for three years?
3 years, yes.
Right. How about you, Eevon? Have you been to Hong Kong, and what do you think of Hong Kong?
Yeah, I've been there in 2008. First impression was like, whoa, all the skyscrapers are so dense, so near to each other, so scary.
Is Hong Kong unit in the central?
It's quite in the city, actually. It's like quite connected to the city.
Okay.
But it's not in the most busiest area. But it's very well connected to the urban areas. It's right in the middle of the urban area.
Is it the one where Zaha did a campus building there? No, not
that
is
was
it?
That was Poly.
Jockey. There was another one.
No, that was Poly U.
Poly U.
But there are a lot of buildings named after Jockey Club in all the universities in Hong Kong because they paid for a lot of the buildings. Yeah.
Rich. Okay, and you did mention like you drew this 2-point perspective. I wonder about the drawing. What did you edit out? I think this is quite funny in a way and also relevant to ask this question, because somehow there is another question that I would like to ask is about how to turn a house to a home. But then for you to draw this room, and I wonder, can you recall like anything that you drew in that particular perspective? Do you have like very unique taste of furniture that you put into that perspective?
I also have a question.
Yeah.
Like, did you have like any like drawing lessons before this, or like did you know anything about architecture before you entered architecture?
No, I entered like as a blank slate. Just went without knowing actually what I'm going into. Yeah, and then like everyone around me can draw, and then I feel like I can't draw, so I'm one of those persons. But I don't remember exactly what I drew for that assignment. But I think there was a bookshelf, and then there was a tiny corner, like a kind of bay window that is a small space that is a little bit cozier. So it's like smaller than a bed, but you can also rest there, like a tiny cozy space. Yeah.
Looks very similar to the photo later.
Yeah,
it looks like the photo that you sent me.
Now that you mention, I realize the similarities. I've never thought of that actually.
Scary shit. Because Queenie sent me a photo this morning, and then I look at it. And it's like, wait, is this the house? This is the room that you mentioned. Later on, I will show it later.
Yeah.
But anyway, so thanks a lot. And I mean, so before you step into architecture school, I wonder, because like you said, is to you kind of like to challenge this idea of room, right? It's about the idea of room and also the built environment. And I thought what you mentioned in your bio is about harmonious relationship between human and surrounding. This is very closely related on how an object and subject, and also background and foreground kind of thing. I think it's very interesting. But I wonder, do you have any personal statement or even philosophical thoughts about architecture before you step in? I mean, of course, before architecture, you might just go in quite with an empty mind. But now, what do you think? Do you believe in the role of architecture itself, or even like in general, like what do you think of architecture?
So before I went in, I really didn't know what to expect. I thought that it's just like creating beautiful, fancy buildings, like skyscrapers and things like that. But then, of course, after the education and working, I kind of expanded my impression on architecture. And for me, I think that something that is very important is actually to really understand how the human experience in the space. How people will actually use it, and I enjoy imagining how people use the space. Yeah.
Right. And in speaking of space, or like I mean this particular question is something related to your childhood, and I wonder, is there any particular building that affected you so much that you think you could define architecture? Is it something related to maybe an old grandma house, or a random housing, locals housing? I think the Razak mentioned is really beautiful, but it's not well documented, I would say. That could be one. And earlier we also mentioned there are a few low rise behind Pearl Point at Auckland Road. Yeah, so I wonder, is there anything related to, feels like, okay, this is from my childhood and I think this is architecture. Now, when you think back now, maybe Auckland Road wet market.
I wouldn't say like there's a particular building that made me feel like this is architecture. But now that I think of it, when I was young, there was a bunk bed in my room, and then my dad we used to play like masa on the bunk bed, and then what we did was just to hang a blanket over the bunk bed so that it kind of forms a shelter. Enclosed space in the lower bunk, and then that would become our house of the day, and then we would just put it in. Yeah, I think that was quite fun.
Right. I think at that point of time, you don't think about enclosure yet. You just want to have fun with the blanket.
Yeah, but somehow the fact that the blanket is there kind of transforms the space already. When the blanket is away, it's just a bed, and then when the blanket is down, then we know that, okay, it's masa time.
Okay.
That's the only thing I can think of from my childhood.
I think at some point also we study architecture too much. We think too much already. I mean, if you ask your father, you will say, yeah, stupid. This is just blanket. Don't think too much. I think I'm not sure. Maybe Eevon will share the same thing, because I think yesterday we watched like the PMB presentation. We kind of share this kind of gap, like architects think so far away from people, and then that's why I think Haziq asked a good question also when I was interviewing Steph Pei, and then he was asking, is it difficult to interview an architect? Because architect is kind of different. They think quite differently.
They speak differently.
They speak very differently as well.
Hard to talk to architects as well.
So if you want to be a person who easier to talk, just put down the ego. I think it's somehow very hard to separate. I mean, the nature of profession itself needs you to be quite egoistic and leader, the leader vibe. Right. So now maybe we can talk a little bit about modern dance. And then you're also a yoga instructor, right? And I think not something very far away, because you did mention about space and this kind of enclosure. And by using dance or even yoga, it actually can feel this kind of atmosphere and environment. Would you like to talk about this? Because you mentioned you learned modern dance in Delft.
Yeah.
So how does that happen? And then do you think that there is it trained you to understand architecture better in a way? How about like modern dance? Like, is there any particular modern dance? I'm not sure about modern dance. I don't know anything about dance.
Same. I have no idea about dance.
I think the experience in Delft kind of encouraged me to step out of the box. So I also wasn't a dancer before going to Delft. I don't call myself a dancer now. It was just like an attempt to learn. But when I went to Delft, I realized that everyone around me has more than one identity. So everyone you know at school as your friend, as your partner in the building technology course, like might be also a professional salsa dancer on like during his or her free time. So that kind of also pushed me to step out of the box and try to do something a little bit different out of my academic life. That's when I learned modern dance, and also the second image is Latin ballroom. But to think about yoga and space, I think it helps in a way where like when I'm practicing yoga, I realize that I'm really picky of where I practice it, like the space around it. Like when I'm looking for a yoga studio that I like, I will actually go and research on how the studio looks like, and then like, is there greenery around, and then when I go and try, like if the studio is very noisy or if it has a good vibe or like the flooring is a very loud material. Actually, like I realize that I'm quite picky on that, and then that might not apply to everyone else. So maybe that's how like architecture kind of influenced my choice in choosing a space to practice yoga. Yeah.
But do you, I mean, just outside architecture, but dance and yoga is like, one is rather passive and one is active, right? You don't move a lot in yoga, but you move
actually,
a lot.
You can move a lot in yoga. It depends on what kind of yoga. So there are yoga that are quite vigorous. Of course, there are also some form of yoga that are more like peaceful and relaxing. Yeah.
I wonder in speaking of dance, right? Because last week also talks about this kind of movement with Clarissa, and then I believe that the project also is the same project with you. I think you have done that also. The one is the small pavilions.
Yeah.
Is it something to do with the human movement or dance or choreography?
That project itself, it's not really about dance, but it's about how the human body occupies a space.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at that point of time, I believe that, of course, we were still young, and then we were talking about ergonomics and human movement or scale and proportion. Is that somehow related to how you perceive space in this sense, like make, as in like dancer can understand space better than architects in a way? Because I was talking to another dancer from Kongsi KL, and it's very interesting. This dancer is like dance in the Auckland Road wet market, and is it called Rensing? I think her name is Rensing.
Yeah. I saw her in the DC2 exhibition. I saw her video.
Oh yeah. So by dancing actually allows you to expand the maximum of yourself, like the hand is open from tip to tip, right? So you're not just like one shoulder width, but you are now like open it up like this. Yeah. But have you done any project related to this, like dance?
Not really. It's more like something I do out of architecture.
Tell us about this.
I think we can go to like the next topic because it's kind of related. Like when you went to Delft, like everyone had like a different identity other than architecture. So this is like a big culture difference compared back to Asia, right? So what else that do you find that is culturally shocking compared like in Western education and Asian education?
I won't say like Western education because I don't know for other Western countries, but in Delft, for one thing, everyone is very direct. Like all the Dutch are very direct, and I think that's very different from our Asian culture. So I find that I also have to be more direct with my words, whether it is like daily conversation or even in my academic writing, or even when I'm presenting my project. Like I can't say like this space is for social interaction. Like if it's a ping pong table, it's a ping pong table. I have to be very specific with what I do and what I say. And another thing is I think there's more of a collaborative kind of vibe, or like there's more opportunities for collaboration. And it also happens more naturally in Delft compared to my previous prior education. Yeah.
Could you like elaborate like how does it become more natural, like collaboration? Because in Asia, like we usually when we talk about collaboration, we think about group work, and then group work is usually like dictated by the lecturers, and then you have to do a group work. So how does it happen like in Delft?
So the part about the dictated part, right? I can give an example. Like for my studio, the one in Mumbai, what we did was the whole class was divided into groups of 3, and then you are given something to look at. Like for example, the topic of this investigation is patterns of inhabitation. So we were supposed to investigate patterns of inhabitation in our site. But then we were divided into different groups, and each group looked at a very specific topic. So my group was borders, and then the other group was maybe like income generation. So they look at modes of income generation, and then there's another group that looks at like social spaces specifically. And then and then whatever comes out of this is a collective knowledge base. So everyone has to do your job really well, because whatever you do would affect everyone else. Because you design housing, you can't just look at borders, you can't just look at income generation, you have to look at it holistically. And I think that worked really well, and it's kind of different from the site analysis that we do before I went into the studio, because before it was more like, oh, we just look at generic stuff and then everyone starts to do your own thing. But this was like, the first part of it was really making sure that everyone contributes to this collective knowledge base. This is the more dictated kind of collaboration, but if we talk about the not so dictated ones, I think it would be more of like student activities, or so there are a lot of student initiated activities and groups that would I think it helps that we have a huge atrium in the school with this orange stairs. Maybe
the Y factory.
It, like, one way. Yeah, that space. And that space was really like, everyone walks past there, and then everything that you want to, like, there's a lot of posters, like this, like basically everything happens there. It's like the center of the school. So it's very easy to just like, say like for half an hour lunchtime, we just meet on the stairs and then talk about something, and then like we just do our own thing, you know. So I think that kind of helps the collaborative process as well for the more informal activities. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Do you think that like studying in Delft, they are talking about quantity in a way? I mean, of course, like architecture wise, a lot of people, they need to be quite hardworking to produce lots of drawings, data analysis. But I always thought that Delft is like a technological school. So it's a technology school, right? So in speaking of study wise, you must have gone through like research quite intensively. Like I mentioned to Sharon as well. I think she also now doing in Delft also, but it's kind of different from you, because yours is like a housing, and housing is always a big thing. And I realized that your tutors, they are engineers, right? Is it?
No.
Because I saw the paper somewhere, it's like professor or engineer or.
The thing is, like for our AR, like our title AR, they have it as IR, which is same as the engineer word in Dutch. So for them, it's the same title, yeah.
Oh, they see
they're not
architects as
engineers. They're actually architects.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think apart from that, I mean, does it really matter? I mean, of course, the title wise is just maybe just spelling difference, but do you see they are more technical in a way? They are more practical side.
I think it's quite holistic in a way that everyone, before you go into Delft, everyone will tell you that Delft gives a lot of emphasis on building technology, which is quite true, because the first week you go into it, there's like a 5-week intensive course on just building technology. And then you have to come up with a building technology assignment. And that already sets the tone of your whole education here. And if in your semester, if say you have an amazing project, but you fail the building technology part, you have to, if you fail it a lot, you have to retake the semester. If you just like miss it by a little bit, you get to repair, and then you can pass the semester. But that's how much of an importance they give to building technology. But it's not to say that that's everything that they care about, because I think it's more about how you link the building technology part to whatever you're trying to address. Yeah.
So it's quite technical in a sense because they don't talk about, it's quite real in a way because it's not like something very utopian like or speculative. I mean, compared to
Well,
Edmund one is crazy, quite floating here
there
and there.
are
But
there are studios who are doing speculative stuff. It's just not my studio because it's a huge school and then there are a lot of studios. So there are certain studios that are more like poetic or maybe speculative. But mine is like mine is like one of the most realistic ones because it's really an issue that you have to address.
Yeah.
So can I ask
And
like
then
how
there's-
many studios are there?
Let's see, there's like interiors. I don't remember exactly how many, but there's interiors and then there's like architectural engineering. So that one is like the most technical one. And then there's mine, like the housing. And then there's like methods and analysis, which is more like more poetic or speculative. Public buildings can also be quite speculative if they want. And then under each chair, a heritage. Yes, heritage is an important one. And then under each chair, there's like more diversion. So like under housing, there's like Dutch housing and global housing. Mine is global housing. Yeah.
And
So did you get to like choose, or is it like they have like a number of students that they have to fill in each studio, or there's no way you can choose?
I got to choose, and I think you can choose like 2 or 3 choices, but I'm quite lucky that I always got my first choice throughout the whole education. Yeah.
And how does that, I mean, kind of laggy, sorry. And I realized that the assignment you have done, they are mostly housing related, like for example, this in Mumbai and Harlem. So Harlem is kind of interesting one. It's not really
that one is not housing.
That one is not housing,
right? It's
right?
a heritage project.
Right. And then here in Singapore, in Ghana is another one as well. Is there any particular reason why you are so interested in housing? Is it something related to your study in Hong Kong?
I think maybe because my final semester in Hong Kong, actually the 2 last semesters, so the whole of year 3 was about housing. And we talk about housing a lot in Hong Kong because that is the thing that everyone cares the most. Like even during a casual conversation, it will always, whatever you start with, it will always end up like, 你買咗樓未啊? It's in everyone's house, or like how many square meters is how many square feet is your house? So it's something that everyone talks about like all the time. So that's also what we explore in the studio a lot. So that was the Singapore project. That was my final project in Hong Kong. And then after that, I worked for a bit, and then I went to the Netherlands, and then I did the Harlem project. Was for my first semester. That was more on heritage. And then and then I thought maybe I should try housing again. And then I went to the Ghana studio, and then after that the Mumbai studio. But I think the emphasis on for this semester, the Singapore one and the ones in Delft are actually quite different. This one is more on like structural and like form manipulation, exploring how humans can inhabit the structure and then how it works with housing. It's not so much on actually how Singaporeans live and what are the issues in Singapore that you have to address. Like it's not so much on that. Whereas the one in Mumbai and Ghana are more site specific.
I think. Oh, sorry, Eevon.
Can I ask a question? This is like a bit, I don't know lah, because the projects that you've done are mostly high rise, right?
The one in Ghana is not high rise. The one in India is a mix of low rise and high rise. The one in Singapore is definitely high rise. Yeah.
So my question is like personally for you lah. Do you want to live in a high rise or do you want to live in a low rise or landed?
Okay.
You don't have to be politically correct.
Yes, okay. I I've never thought of it like that because most of my life I've actually, like, apart from now I live with my parents, so it's a landed. But apart from right now, my whole life was in a high rise. Even before we moved here, we were living in a high rise. So I don't see that as a huge problem. And practically speaking, I think that landed is too much work to maintain. So like, high rise is easier to
Good point.
clean up. Yes, in terms of doing chores lah. Yeah.
Actually, I in speaking of that, right? I mean, I just wanted to compare like Malaysians. I always tell my friend that Malaysians are super lucky and fortunate. I mean, like in I mean, it's like 40 minutes away. Let's say you say Nilai or Banting, like my hometown. Everyone just has their own house, it's a landed property, I mean, of course, it's different because the spending power is also lower, but it's very lucky because what you have is actually like directly you park your car and then that's your home, right? I mean, compared to high rise, you need to park a car, take a lift, and then go out. I mean, Malaysians are very lucky. And then compared to like from what I see in UK, they don't have like single story or the double story dwellings a lot unless you are rich. Otherwise, you have tenements, right? So tenements is
or you have to go very, very rural, Gary.
Yeah. And then tenements is actually, I think, is quite a good idea. I'm not sure what you guys. Maybe later we can talk about it. Because tenements somehow brings in a certain density. It's not too high, so you reduce the need for the apartments. So yeah, what do you think? I mean, do you think that Malaysians should have like practice into this way of like maybe we don't have to build so much high rise, but we make the low rise a little bit more dense? In a way.
I think that's a good idea to try, like to have something in between. It's not just one story or like 30 stories, like have something in between. I think that's something nice to be explored. But I also wanted to add on your point, right? You said that in Malaysia, like a lot of people have their own space because it's a landed property, have their own outdoor space. Whereas like obviously in Hong Kong, no one has that luxury to have a landed property.
Right.
But I feel like it's also kind of give and take in the sense that in Hong Kong, I can just go downstairs and walk to the beach. And not beach, I walk to the seaside or walk to the park. And then I have the outdoor space. But here I have to drive a long way and then park my car and then go to a park. So so that's the difference. Here it's more like you have open space, but it's very private. And it's also confined within your compound. Whereas in Hong Kong, like it's a space where everyone shares and then you can just go like to a public space.
But I mean, I believe that your interest, because I always thought the research and analysis on housing is rather the hard data, where you can get numbers and statistics saying that how many square feet you want, how many, let's say the land costs, and the numbers are and figures are quite clear. But I wonder, is there anything like on the soft side where talks about the idea of home? You are now I'm taking a step back where we are talking about home, not houses. And when you send me this photo, like I said, it perhaps it's something related quite close to your drawing when you were small. You got this bay window and it's quite well lit. In speaking of like home, like perhaps in this sense, like idea of home, like Giovanni Palasma is the famous one talking about homes, right? Not really about house. In that sense, do you find that kind of direction so that you can balance it out in a way, we don't talk, what if we just don't talk about numbers for a while? We don't talk, we talk about feeling, we talk about domicile, you talk about attachment.
Personally, if you ask me what makes a home, I would say my plants. Because like it denotes a kind of responsibility there. And that's what makes it different from a B&B. If I'm just going to stay there for 1 week, I wouldn't care like having a plant. Like having a plant in the room means that I have to be responsible in maintaining this room as my own space. maintaining the lives of my plants. So yeah, and then to have plants also you need light. So I think like sunlight is also quite important for me. Having a room that has actually ample sunlight.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's you when you did mention it's like feeling a living thing, so that you have to take care like a children in your place, and then you have to take care.
Almost like that.
It's not like cat or dogs, but it's there. But
Yeah, it's there.
yeah, and now maybe we can move on to the main part where it talks about housing, and
Yeah.
the final project that you did is in Mumbai, and the idea of participatory design. Of course, this one you can define later on. You know, we sort of talk a little bit about it in Discord. This idea of participatory, and this participatory, in fact, I always think that it happens already in the Eastern in Asia context. Like BB Doshi one is very obvious, and then what he designed is just like a shell, and then you can control, you can stay there, and then later we see like Elemental, Aravena. Perhaps Eevon, you can share a little bit thoughts on that. But the idea of participatory design, this word is not really exist before that, because I mean the term itself is quite new, I think. And speaking of housing, participatory design housing, we talk about Walter Sigar, Lucian Kroll, or Ralph Erskine. So all these are rather, because I think it's because of the failure in the 70s, because of this kind of modern movement saying that, oh, architects wanted to be a boss, but now it's like half-half. Talking about like, Jonas Fredman, architecture with the people, by the people, for the people. And I find there is a contradict definition or understanding in this sense, like participatory design, because there's always someone who leads the thing, who is the architect, because it's not totally people thing, because perhaps architect did like 30% and then the people will do the 70%. I think it's always this kind of negotiation of power and authority. I wonder what is your general thought in this sense, after you have done like a few assignments on the housing.
I think the term participatory is definitely used very superfluously. Right? People use it all the time, but I think when we talk about participatory design, like as you said, it's important to actually explore or define who decides what. So if it's completely up to the people 100%, is that really a good thing? And if it's like 10%, and then what happens out of that? I think that is something that we have to be more careful with when we talk about participation. Like in the case of Mumbai, we have already seen the 100% driven by people model. That's a slum, right? So yeah, so I think have to be more careful when we use this one. I think it's something very interesting to explore, but it's something that we need to, when we say you want to do participatory design, the next step is to actually think about who decides and who provides, and decides what and provides what. Yeah.
Okay, Yvonne, what do you think? I mean, this idea of participatory design and also inviting people to be part of the design process has always been quite socialist, right? Or quite ideal in a way. But it's speaking from an architectural, from speaking of an architect or architecture student, what is your thought? I mean, at some point, people might think is kind of like a threat. It's like a threatening to the status quo of architects.
Actually, but when I say this, I don't mean to offend you, like Queenie. When you said that slum, right? Slum, this word is also a very, very, tricky word. If you mention slum in my studio, you kena already. and I think that because like this term, right? I feel like it's I don't know, I think it is being like exploited by architects right now. Participatory design. I feel like participatory design, you in a way you can say that actually we don't even need architects, like in a way, like the people can just build by themselves. And then if you see like example, you don't have to look far lah, actually. In Malaysia itself, kampung houses are actually participatory design. Like Malay kampung houses, even
I don't
Chinese
think that
kampung houses.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, like
I mean, like
because
those are more self-built houses already.
yeah.
It's not like, yeah.
But for me, I think it's participatory because especially like Malay houses, because Malays, they actually work together, like a whole kampung come together to build one house.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is like the true participatory design, like the people build it by themselves for themselves.
Yeah.
And then but when it comes to, but I also don't totally disagree with you like where architects come in. Like I feel like architects are like the middleman that can actually help the people. So the problem with architects nowadays is that we are not one with the people. We are actually siding the money side. We are siding the developer side. But I don't blame architects also because like we are stuck in this web of capitalism, and then architects are kind of like, you can say we don't have like the authority anymore, and then we don't know how to actually survive. And then the easiest way to survive is to work for developers and then like earn easy money, because working with people is hard. Working people is not easy, especially like the people who's going to live in it, like especially those people who's going to own the house. When you own a house, you have a lot of stake in it. You're gonna have like a lot of opinions in it, so it's not gonna be easy to work for the people who's actually gonna live in it. It's actually easier to work for a developer that's gonna make like a cookie cutter design and then just sell it off, because there's no people when you design it. When you were designing, there's no people. It's an abstract people in a sense. Yeah.
That's okay. There are two questions, right? One is that because Queenie, you mentioned like, okay, like quote unquote slum. Okay, don't attack me, Eevon. But you did mention this when like in Mumbai, the problem is that when it's 100 people giving out to the people, of course there are certain beauties of it, saying that it doesn't really matter because as long as people are happy about it, then it's okay, right? But then the problem is that without this kind of standardized quality, we're saying that the access of water, sewerage. I think that's the reason why you think that architects comes in and to improve the quality of life. That's where you don't want to have let the people to run their quality of life like nothing, and then drink the water that is so filthy, and then you live in the house that is so poor ventilated. So that's where you think that the architects comes in and can be the advisor in this sense. And at this point, then I understand that why architects are important, because to ensure the basic need is are met. That's the one thing, right? And the second thing is that when I was looking up to the works, especially in Mumbai, is a tropical. I would say it's a tropical country. I hope. So that sort of make the difference when you design. Let's say, I'm not sure, is there any assignment come across in Western country, perhaps in Netherlands? So how do you see this climatic factor in designing housing? Yeah.
Climatic factor is actually one of the most important thing we look at in this studio. So in the case of Mumbai, it's cross ventilation and also sun shading, and also the fact that the toilet has to be close to the facade, because that's not the case in the Netherlands. And I mean, it's not something new to me because in Malaysia it's like that, but for a lot of my classmates, they actually spend a long time to actually figure out the housing configuration, just because they instinctively they don't think about having the toilet at the facade, because in Netherlands you want to have the maximum facade for sunlight, because it's always dark and gloomy and like raining, so you want to have maximum sunlight. So instinctively they would put the toilet within the building with an extra shaft, but then that's not the way you do it in Mumbai.
Right.
So that's that's that in terms of climate.
Mm.
You want to talk about cultural difference or?
Yeah, that could be one thing. And also coming back to the first question, actually, I'm more curious on the control and the role of architects in this sense, because like Yvonne said, if let's say the participatory could be defined like the kampong area, they build their own house. I think it's kind of different because they got a huge land. It's like a huge land, and then you just plonk the house there, and then it doesn't really affect anyone else, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. But in speaking of like when I looking out into Brazil or even like India, for example, they are the problem is that the population is one thing, and it's always this density of there is a play of population versus the land area, because that's where the density come from. Because if let's say one room, one people staying versus like 100 people staying, that's where the problem is. Yeah. So would you like to add on to that? I mean, like, how do you see when? Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Brazil, because I was reading this one book. They were talking about Brazil as well. Like Brazil had a lot of special housing experiments in the sense that they did a lot of housing cooperatives. And also, so the way Brazil do their cooperatives is similar to what Queenie is heading towards. Like the architects are the middleman that works for the people, and then they mediate between the people and also the government officials. So like in this sense, the architect is like the middleman to do the housing projects, and then like the people will actually be the one that is constructing the building itself.
Perhaps it's something similar to this case. I think maybe Queenie, would you like to add on later on? So how I see this is they get the shell, it's like you get the idea of this is your lot, but you cannot go far, you cannot invade other people. It's what Aravena did it, right? He tried to force the structural framework as the envelope so that you don't demolish the structural framework. So what you have is just inside, and then you still can expand and grow within this a rigid structural framework, which is at some point it is a control of architects, but you try not to say it. you impose.
I wouldn't deny, like in the studio we call this controlled participatory design.
Right.
I wouldn't deny that there's an element of control. There is. That's why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
I wouldn't deny that part. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that's where I think the architects can ensure that, oh, I want my design to be like this because I don't want you to chin-chai grow here and there. Then what's the point for me to design, right? I mean, might as well you just build your own hut in the in the land, and then you just do whatever you want.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like when Yvonne said, like when people build in a kampong, that's the real participatory. It is, and whatever I'm doing here, it's not completely new. Like I didn't invent the participatory aspect in housing in Mumbai. It was already there. It's just that it usually happens in more maybe low-cost housing, not even like no-cost housing that's provided by the government, but in maybe like slums or like self-built housing. And on the other hand, you have that, and then on the other hand, you have all these like high-rise, cookie-cutter high-rise all around the suburb that are exactly the same. So people have no say at all as of like how they want their houses to be. So what I was trying to do is to see, is there a way we can come up with something that is kind of in between these modes? So on one hand, you have the perks of having a fixed structure and then like the basic sanitary facilities and shared amenities like you have in the cookie cutter housing that they create, but also have this element of participatory in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yvonne, would you like to add on? Because later on I would like to talk about heritage as well. In a sense, I also have this struggle where before that I was thinking, why don't we adaptive reuse, and at the same time you wanted to progress, you can't adaptive reuse based on the old building structure. They're gonna collapse anytime if you build on top like 3 or 4 stories on top. Then I'm not sure, Queenie, perhaps you have this kind of struggle in a way you wanted to progress, but at the same time you wanted to conserve at the same time, especially in Mumbai, this context where it's so rich, with rich culture. Is quite similar to perhaps like Malaysia, you have a lot of rituals or cultural identities going on where you try your best. Of course, we always wanted to achieve two things at one time, but of course, it's always it's quite tough in a way, right? Sorry, Eevon, do you have any thoughts?
I just want to say, actually, Queenie, I really love your project. Like, really, I really like it. And I think that you already try really hard to actually include that participatory element in it. And I think that's the most successful part of your project. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say. so don't think that I'm like against you or something, but I really like your project. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
We are all here to I mean, that's the beauty of brainstorming, I would say, and also create this kind of constructive criticism. And again, I like the fact that the roof structure actually is create this kind of double structure. It looks like double structure, and I think it's perhaps here is like an open ceiling so that you can have like a hot air rises effect. Yep. And okay, I was looking at this photo, right? It's kind of laggy, sorry. There is this one image of existing building, and then you superimpose, right, this one, and then with you sort of like add in the new blocks. And I wonder, I mean, just put it aside, okay, like you think about it as a Queenie B, and then you look at Queenie A's work, right? There must be when you are designing this, you must have a lot of struggle where you wanted to preserve it, but at the same time you're trying to achieve that kind of density. Yeah. So would you like to talk about that? I mean, this is kind of like questioning our architectural education, where do we really need to demolish the old building to create this, or is there any better way or creative way to do this?
Yeah. Okay. That's a very good question, and it's like interestingly, during my finals, right, when I present, I'm in the housing studio. I invited my professor from the heritage studio to come to see me present. And then the first thing that my housing tutor told my heritage tutor is like, this girl has too much heritage in her head. We tried very hard to pull her out of her heritage way of thinking, because okay, I picked this site now. Basically, this site is okay, maybe I can kind of annotate a bit. So this site is basically filled with a lot of houses that look like this, which is what you see here. And then it's like copy and paste, all the same along. And initially, my idea was to think about how to revamp the existing structure rather than creating a new one. But then when I actually went to the site and looked at them, a lot of them are actually, they are all in different kind of conditions. So some of them are actually quite nice, well maintained, well lit. Some of them are very dangerous. Like when I talk to the people there, actually, there's this guy who got hurt by the fallen slab, and then his leg was injured, and then now he can't walk properly. So it really varies. So that's why I decided to do this project in a way where two of these, it's existing structure. I didn't force them on them, but usually when two of these houses come together, they form something they call a society, which is like a committee, and then they decide on things. So in my scheme, right, you can actually, like the societies can actually choose whether or not they want to redevelop their plot. If they think that their housing is very dangerous, like it's derelict, it's too dangerous for people to live in there, then they can choose one of my three typologies, depending on their aspirations to redevelop. And if they think that it's fine, then they can keep it. So I'm not forcing anyone to redevelop. I'm just saying that this is another possibility, because there's also a rumor going on in this area that the place is going to be redeveloped into a 22 high-rise by a huge developer, and the developer is going to buy out everything from everyone. And this rumor has been there for 15 years. Like it has been ongoing for 15 years, nothing happened. But then it's also stopping people from maintaining the building itself, because they think that this is going to be bought off anyway. Why do I want to spend more to maintain this? So that's why, like, what I'm trying to propose is like, why do we have to wait for someone to come and do something? Like if we can do something on a case by case basis, initiated like partly by the people who live here, then people can have a little bit more control in their housing areas. Yeah.
I think it could be part of the strategy of the developer to like spread this rumor so that people purposely don't maintain it, and then when it's so run down and then like dangerous,
They can buy it at low price.
Yeah.
And then no one lives there. Yeah, exactly. There are a lot of vacant ones already, or there are a lot of buildings that actually look so run down. We thought that they are vacant, but there's actually people living in there, which is quite dangerous. Yeah.
I'm surprised that you actually made a visit to Mumbai, right? Especially this side. When you were there, I mean, do you feel the same? Like, in speaking of housing quality wise, definitely quite disappointing. At some point, you found out that, you know, why, like, at least the basic water is not there. The toilet also looks like this, and then the roof may be leaking or whatsoever. What were the most scariest thing that you saw from the site where you can't acceptable, it's kind of unacceptable, and say, how could someone living there? I mean, do you mind to name one thing that you found out is so surprise to you?
I wouldn't call it like
beam
scary.
ones, right?
Sorry?
The beam that you mentioned, that's scary already.
The beam that was
fell.
falling down.
Yeah.
I didn't see that in person, but I heard that from someone I've interviewed. Like he was really limping when he was walking.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, but it was really nice to talk to us. I actually saw it in another site. It's like, so in the beginning there were they call it chawls. So basically 2 rows of like units, single story. Sometimes they renovate their own unit, so like something pops up, it becomes 2 stories. But then there are these builders who came and say like, we want to buy this plot from you, and then after that we will give you a unit that has the same size. So they moved them to temporary housing, and then they started to like build on that land. But what they did is they basically just extruded the same plot into 5 stories, which means that the 5 stories buildings are very close to each other. We call them handshake chawls because you can literally shake your neighbor's hand when you're standing on one building, like you can shake the person's hand from the other building. So, and that was really unfair for the people who live there because they gave up something that was actually okay to live in one of these like really cramped, like, yes, the unit is the same size, but then you have no light, you have no ventilation. Yeah, so that was something that was not really nice. Like the not really nice part of the suburb that I visited. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to come back a little bit because this image I showed you before already, and then the reason I think the reason why you sent me this document, because I was asking like, do you think is there any I won't say the best example, but rather the precedent study that you think is interesting, that you know what we can learn from it. This design is what sorry, I can't pronounce the name. Molenvliet. So it's designed by Franz van der Wolf. Okay, would you like to talk about this? What good about this project? And then the second question is, perhaps you can apply this project in Malaysian context, or your personal assignment into Malaysian context.
Okay, so this project was designed by Franz van der Wolf, and he is the pioneer of the open building movement in the Netherlands. And this was actually the first attempt in the Netherlands to have some kind of participatory element in a housing that is not single story, a multi-story housing. And it's called experimental housing at the time. They had this grant from the government to do this. And basically what he did was he designed the shell, as you call it, like the structure.
Yeah.
And so this diagram is his proposal of the levels of intervention and control. So he proposed that the larger the scale, the more control should go to like authorities, and then when it gets to a smaller scale, like when you get to the infill scale, the decision and control will go much more to the users themselves. So this kind of proportional relationship. Yeah. And so what he did was he designed the structure, and then each unit has a different configuration. And they also have a different facade, and but they are still within this framework. So he proposes this idea of diversity within wholeness. And through this scheme, he also ensures that everyone has access to an outdoor space. So if you are on the upper floor, you would have a loggia or a balcony, depending on your orientation. Yeah.
Right.
So, and it's also a checkerboard kind of configuration. So if you see the site plan, it's like there are always two courtyards, and then one courtyard acts more like an entrance, a front entrance, and then the other courtyard is more like a back lane, back garden kind of space. Yeah.
And when I was reading this particular page, it's called support structure, right? And that's where the control comes in. I'm of course we always want the best from the both, and this structure allows people to ensure, of course, first thing is safety there, where the architects comes in and say, okay, I can ensure that this building is safe, and at the same time to ensure that you have the enough access to fresh air or light, natural sunlight. I think that's where it's very important, in where the architects comes in, and later on you don't want to control everything. So what you did is just allow this kind of you mentioned diversity within openness, right?
Wholeness.
Within the wholeness, right? So this is very interesting. It's called open building design. I think it's very close to elemental. Eevon, you wanna add on to that while you designing. I mean, when you're doing your final assignment in Taylor's, also something related to that.
Actually, my final design was not really housing, but it's a cultural center. So it was inspired by Aravana's half house design, because I was studying the site at Malacca, and then that community is called the Kristang people. So the Kristang people are actually half Portuguese and half Malaysians. And then I was inspired by the way they extend their houses throughout times. And then I kind of like apply half of that idea, and also with Aravana's idea of the half housing into the cultural center. So like the cultural center would be like built by the people, and then it will be expanded according to their financial means when they need a bigger space. So that was my general idea lah, basically. Yeah.
And what is your thought on the application into Malaysian context, Queenie? I mean, we sort of working on it now. I mean, but so far, even though we haven't, I mean, it's very early stage lah. What is your thought on like applying into local context, and perhaps do you have any personal interest in because maybe I can point out one or two. One is that perhaps you can add on some like a parasitic building on top of the single story buildings, like residential in Malaysia, or it could be taking advantage of the abandoned buildings or oversupplied high rise, and then you can have this kind of parasitic building or how residential within this high rise. What do you think that you can see any personal interest into either side of these directions? Or perhaps you want to look at shop houses.
I think I would be more interested in looking at like abandoned buildings, how to revive or revamp them. Because I know that we have a lot of those lying around.
I think when Gary said parasitic houses on high rise, you know what I think of? You know, like most Malaysian flats, right? The way they cage up their windows, and then they extend the window to actually like hang their clothes. I feel like that's actually in a way a parasitic kind of architecture element.
But that one is damn minimal,
They're very
minimal.
small lah.
I think you want to go
thinking of something on the roof, right?
Yeah. They added something on the roof. Yeah, that's why I was thinking that's the challenge, because in like private condos where I used to stay, like OG Park Lane,
Mm-hmm.
there's a rule saying that you cannot paint the handrail, because the handrail is actually the identity of the apartment. If it's blue
Ah,
color, you cannot paint it a blue color.
I
And
think window also, right? You
window
cannot
also
change
cannot.
color. Yeah.
Yes, you
yeah.
cannot change. And then when compared to like the, let's say like Merdeka period or post Merdeka period, where you have a lot of modernist block, right? It's like the residential block, like with van blocks especially. I think that one is more flexible in a sense, because you can see people actually extend a little bit here and there. It's quite similar to Singapore CDB, but it's not that extreme, because CDB is extremely controlled. In Singapore it's kind of different. Uh, but in Malaysia, I can't really tell any good example, I would say. But I can only say like Barbican is the best I ever seen. It's like it's control, but then what their area of playing is interior. You can go crazy with the interior. I don't care about you. But then as long as you don't touch the exterior, that's fine. I think that's always happened in the so-called participatory design, where the boundary is always within the interior. You cannot go out. You try you try to maintain the identity of the building, the respect the respect the existing architect. So I'm
But
not sure.
Barbican is also not a council housing, to be honest. It's
No,
built by the council, but it's not like real social housing. It's actually for middle class people.
it is, yeah, because it's damn atas the area. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, before we move on, perhaps we can talk about Duduk Rumah Artist and also Time to Rise. This is another interesting project recently launched. Eevon and Queenie, would you like to add on to anything before we move on?
Mm,
No.
no, I don't have anything on the head of my
Okay,
mind.
but I'm looking forward to how we work on later on, because we do have, yeah, we are brewing something along with other friends. Okay, so maybe for the next session we can talk about Duo Rumah Artist. I think it
Yeah.
is sort of launched because of COVID. Very very straightforward. It says Duo Rumah means stay at home. Tell us about this. And I realized that this campaign or this initiative sort of founded by a team of female artists, girl powers, and I found out that most of them are they I think most of them are from architectural background, and then somehow
The first 5 people who came together are almost all from architectural background. There's one guy, by the way, 4 girls.
okay.
But then yeah, but he's not here because he wasn't in the core team that we formed later. But then after that, when we expanded, there are more and more people coming in. So right now, it's not all architectural. There are people from all different kinds of industries.
Okay, so what you did, what you girls did, it's like a platform. It's like an open platform where is it open for any artists who are interested? They can join in. Is it like somehow like a network?
Yeah, anyone who wants to join can join.
Okay.
It actually didn't start out as a platform idea. It just started out as a campaign during MCO, where we wanted to just say thank you to people who have contributed to COVID-19 relief efforts. Like if you donated to some charities and so on and so forth. So we drew free portraits for people who have donated, and then and we thought that it's something that was going to last for 10 days only, because at that point it was 14 days, right? MCO was 14 days. And then it kept on expanding, and then we kept on like continuing this, and then more and more people joined.
Right.
And then this campaign went for more than a month, 1.5 months, I think. And then yeah, and then it kind of became a collective with people of different drawing styles and different kind of interests, different kind of backgrounds coming together to actually do this. And we think that that was very valuable. So even when the campaign stopped, we tried to maintain it as a platform. And then from time to time, we still have different kind of activities to keep it going, and also to use art as a tool for social engagement, to engage the public. Yeah.
And I do have another question for you personally, because I think sort of get the same idea from Clarissa's podcast as well. She was talking about this idea of freelance. I mean, not really freelance, but rather, you know, you have multiple things going on. So you don't lock yourself as, you know, like as architecture assistant working in a firm 9 to 6. What is your reflection in this sense? Because you also teach in MIA and also you run this campaigns. Of course, this campaign is not really you know, in realistic term, it's not a profit driven project, but rather is a community project, I would say. And when this apply, I'm not sure if you talk to any, of course you talk to these artists, but I wonder what is their thought when, especially in MCO, I think architects also facing the financial problem about the sustainability of running a practice. But I think for artists is perhaps even tougher because they don't work in a very stable basis or secure or rigid basis. Yeah. So what is your thought on that?
To be honest, I don't think I know enough to answer this for all artists, because I think everyone has a different way of doing things. And also the members in our community, a lot of them are not full-time artists. There are a few full-time artists, but there are also a lot of people who do art on the side as an interest, or maybe they have a second side job that is creating art, but maybe they sell insurance, for example. So I can't really tell. I think what MCO brought for this group of people is that these are the people who had a 9 to 5 job on a daily basis, but because of MCO, maybe they were temporarily at home and had time to actually had the opportunity to actually spend more time on their other hobby, which is drawing.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you like to share like because the portraits for Malaysia is a fundraising campaign. I can't recall how much the money been raised, but it sounds quite enormous at that point of time, and it's about like few thousand ringgit, right?
20,000 is it? Yeah, almost.
Yeah, that's quite a lot, and that means that there is a certain support at which Malaysians they are willing to do that, because that's the optimistic side we wish to see. Because I always thought the art scene in Malaysia is very very shallow in a way, or very blunt. But I'm quite surprised that you guys can actually achieve to that result, which is quite surprisingly good. So maybe to close it up, you want to talk about like what's next for Duduk Rumah Artis? Do you envision like what's next? Do you guys wish to do more workshops or even more on the product side?
We actually have some workshops that are ongoing, but it's more like our artists would start like a workshop or a class or an art jamming session with us, and also with Loneliness Lab, Keith from Loneliness Lab, and then we invite everyone to come and join, and then we draw something together. That is something that is ongoing now. We already had 2 sessions, and we are planning to have more in the coming months. Before the second MCO, we were actually planning to have an exhibition, a physical one, but because of that, the plan kind of halted. So we are still looking for an opportunity to revive that dream. And looking for the right time to do that.
Okay, yeah, I think we are all quite looking forward to that events, and also how to bring artists together. I think it's not the point of, I think Duduk Rumah Artis at a certain point it seems to be almost invisible, because the focus is always on the artist, and the Duduk Rumah artist is just serving as the network or platform to bring people together. I think what's similarly done by, Clarissa on Creative Hubs or Joanne with BAO, the focus is not always the platform, but rather the participants, the artists who actually do it. So
and
what
also
you
the
are,
public who joins in.
yeah, so your role in a sense is a bridge. It's almost like you try not to impose the the spotlight on yourself, but rather on the artist. So thanks a lot for that. And really
Thank you.
so any for the updates, we can actually always check out Duduk Rumah artist Instagram. I think it's more active there, right? Or do you have Facebook?
We have Facebook also. It's the same as the Instagram. It's at Duduk Rumah Artist.
Great. So, and not just about the public who interested to contribute, but I believe the artists who are interested can drop in the email, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the last part I would like to talk about Time to Rise is very recent. I didn't really manage to read up a lot of information, but congratulations though. I mean, to
Thank you.
have won the Communicating Science for Climate Action. I think that's that one is related to embassy. Is it? Is it something related to embassy or?
It's a grant that was, yes, British High Com and Eco-Night.
Right. If not mistaken, I sort of read a few stories, and this project kind of comes in a very short time, isn't it? As in, like, a very short time to bring in the team, and then somehow, I don't know, it's like some magic, it's very very scary, and then you guys just did it and won the grant. Tell us about this, like about the time frame wise and how many people actually working on it. As I know, like Haziq also part of the team.
Now we have 6.
Right.
Yeah. In the beginning, we only had 4, and then we drew in 2 more people. Yeah. Now we have 6, and we started this like end of December, I think.
Right.
And then it was quite close to the deadline, so I think it was just 2 weeks. The crazy one should be another grant because we applied for 2 grants, but anyway, there was one grant that we did everything in 1 week and then we just submitted. We didn't get that one, but we got this one. This one, I think we had 2.5 weeks to kind of came up with a proposal and then submitted. And then when we got the grant, we had when we got the grant, we kind of have to start immediately. Like it has to start already. So it's something that would happen within a very short time frame.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask what's the proposal about? Of course, this is something very closely related to food security. Perhaps that's something related to Haziq's interest in like farming, right?
Yeah.
But what's the outcome of this proposal? Are you planning to do some farm, or it's much more on the software side, which is on educating people on food security? In this case, to talk about rice, which is quite straightforward and it's like a stable food.
Yeah. So we wanted to talk about climate science with something that everyone can relate to. So that's why we chose rice, because everyone eats rice. And so food security became our entry point into looking at climate science.
Right.
The reason we do this is to kind of educate or advocate that you don't need to be a scientist to actually care about climate science. Right? You can, like as a normal consumer, you can do your part to address climate change. And what we have been doing is we were holding a series of co-creation workshops in relation to climate science and food security. And we are going to, we plan to have 5 and we already completed 4, so 1 more to go. And after this series of co-creation workshop, we would actually like to consolidate everything that we have, whether it is from our own research or from the input of the participants within the co-creation workshop, or through our meeting with these experts. Some of them have actually been involved in writing the IPCC report, to consolidate all these things that we learn and then come up with a card game, something tangible that everyone can play and learn about climate science and food security. Yeah.
I'm quite curious on how grant works. That do you have a specific timeline where is this a 2-year program or is it 1-year program? Is there any
It is
like
a few months program. That's why the time is really tight because we have to
right,
complete everything and all the documentation by 17 May.
right?
So
So and then the
and we
workshop is actually one part of it, like to like
yes,
plug in this event, and then the
yeah,
this is this is yesterday, right?
yeah. This was yesterday.
Right. And then it was how was it? What the workshop?
It was nice. It was quite interesting.
Right.
And we actually got to made YB Rajiv a farmer. And he has to come up with like action cards and event cards that are related to the farmer.
And in this sense, right, it's quite related to political direction as well. I'm not saying that is like the there are some politics that I don't think we should talk about it, but it just in a way that how do you see the involvement of authority or governmental body to join in so that you can connect with the people in from the top down level while at the same time you also from the bottom up, because like by engaging to the to YB perhaps it might create more ripple effect in a way. What do you think?
We hope so because actually why we got YB on board was because YB Rajiv had this program where he was looking for climate science, climate action ambassadors. And at the same time we were doing this, so when we reached out to him to say, hey, do you want to support us? He like on his end, he was also looking for ambassadors. So in the end, like a few of us became the climate action ambassadors, and then he also came to help us on, came to join us in this program.
Right.
And I don't know. I can't speak for YB, but I hope to see more engagement throughout our process.
Yeah.
Like maybe later on when we have something tangible, we can do more collaboration.
Right. And because like you said, this is like wow, they already have a plan in their mind, and then you found out that, okay, why don't we join together? But by means of default, do they already have this establishment where they already quite keen to do this series of activities? Because I think what you are doing now is rather self-initiated, or if you didn't win the grant, you wouldn't have do this far, right? Because by speaking of resources wise, it might be quite exhausting without a team. But I'm just curious, like in speaking of how do you know about the government? Do they have programs already set it up, and kind of ongoing? But it's just that it's our knowledge. Do you think are they active? Are they active in creating all these like climate change related or food security related topics, or events or program?
I think YB Rajiv is quite active. Like I see him on Clubhouse all the time talking about climate science, but I'm not exactly sure what the government is doing. I just know that he has this
I can tell you
ambassador plan.
Yeah.
Food security is zero in Malaysia.
Yeah, I mean that's a problem, right? I mean that's the reason why I think Queenies and team is very important to activate this kind of topic, or else nobody gonna talk about it, and then everyone just focus on the politic games. Yeah.
I don't know whether you. That they...
Sorry. Yeah.
I was gonna tell you that there's another YB that you guys might be able to approach, which is YB Sim in Penang. He was the agriculture deputy, or is it he was the minister? I forgot already. Like in Pakatan Harapan government, and then he always talks about food security as well. He's also very interested in this area, so maybe you guys can approach him. Sim Zi Din, yeah. I can type in the chat.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks a lot, Queenie. It's really refreshing to hear from you. I think I got the similar reflection. I don't know why every time I think of Queenie, I think of Clarissa, I will think of Queenie. It's a vice versa thing. I think both of you working quite closely. Also teach in MIA as well. So thanks a lot for your sharing. And I think today's is very diverse. We don't just not just talking about housing, and somehow it's branching out from your childhood, I would say, because you mentioned like drawing of your room, and then it draws back to this idea of design houses and homes. And then you did mention that you can't really draw, but somehow you come out with duduk rumah artists. and then and then because of people and then somehow stars align, and then you meet different kind of people, and you come up with the initiative on time to rise. Is it called time to rise? Yeah, time to rise. So it's very interesting that the journey is so at some point it's so not architectural in the sense, but it's very architecturally related at some point, because we have been talking about people, we are talking about climate change, but in architecture at some point I think architects at some point take things for granted. We take things so simply, and the words are so big. I mean, from yesterday sharing on PNB, I also start to hesitate the vocabularies that we use in architecture as well. So thanks a lot, Queenie. So Eevon, would you like to add on anything?
Not really much. It's a very interesting conversation. I think we had fun, right?
Definitely. We can definitely catch up again. I mean, just simply talk about climate change, it could be one big topic. Time to rise already is food security. I believe that there must be a tremendous effort on research already have been done. I just can't wait to see the final outcome. And is there the card game will be published anytime soon?
We don't know yet, because the card game is actually like something that we plan internally, but it's not part of the grant. So right now the focus would be on like fulfilling the grant, and then maybe looking for more grant to carry on to the next phase.
Okay. Are you planning to integrate this into, I don't know, like planning department or architecture site where to implement farming as part of the architectural program or development program? If not mistaken, like there was an article on farming. The one was Sexan shared that, if not mistaken, talking about make farming or allotments as the compulsory thing in residential design. So yeah, I'm not sure, Queenie, do you see this bridging of housing and time to rise together?
I think that's a bit far-fetched for us right now. Like, I don't see that happening, because we are aiming for something that is more like an education product at this point. Yeah, but I can see how the things that I've learned in my architectural education and my teaching right now being applied into the process of creating the card game.
Right.
That I can see, but I can't see like the bridge between housing and time to rise yet for now.
I do have another question, is that because before that you mentioned like the interest in delft, where you say, people have another hobby and not just doing architecture. And of course all these are like a work, the full-time thing, and then the part-time you do like yoga and also dance. How do you see, like, because I think the better question is to ask, do you think people should work two jobs at one time? Do you agree that people should work on two jobs instead of one? Not sure, perhaps your reflection on you're working quite flexibly.
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't say everyone should do that, because everyone is different, but I do think that there should be more. I hope to see more flexibility in that sense. Like, more people could actually have the choice to be in different worlds, not just like devoting their whole life in one thing. Right. If they want to, right? If someone wants to be an architect for their whole life, then that's good for them, but not everyone is wired in that way.
Yeah. And I think it's very interesting to bring out this idea of what you want and what you need, because in realistic world, we still need to feed our own stomach. Yes, but at the same time, we wanted to feed our brain, that our interest and passion to live a life. Okay, so final questions. It's not really a question, but request. I would like to invite you to throw a question. I'm not sure if you have any to ask the audience, or you even want to ask me or ask Eevon or Amos here. You can ask anything. It could be an open question. We don't have to answer
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, since we are all here, I would like to know how you actually delegate your time for all the different things that you guys are doing. Because I know that all of you are doing, like, also having multiple identities and doing many things, and then you're also active in various platforms.
Right.
So I'm really curious how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yvonne, you want to answer now? I'm quite curious also. I want to know your answer.
I don't think I have very good time management, to be honest. I actually cannot multitask, to be honest. So usually I will try to finish like my main identity stuff first. Then
Right.
only I will try to work on my side identity stuff. So
Your
I
main
think
identity is student, or
yeah, now it's
Okay.
student lah for now.
Yeah.
So I try to finish like my main stuff before I start working on the side stuff first. So
Yeah.
actually, so it seems like I managed both okay lah, but I don't spend that much time on the side stuff, but I try lah.
I think that's the beauty of bringing people together, because like Time to Rise also, each of the member, they do have their own full-time job, or the so-called
Yes,
proper job.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they work as architects, or work as they have like office work to run, and then at the same time to
Yeah.
contribute this part-time to work on this project. I think
Yeah.
that's the spirit. I would say I wish to push the young people to think about it, because I think well, I mean, everyone also have the capacity to do drawings, but how to do more than that is, you apart from need to work smart, you need to work hard now. I think that's a very competitive scene, I would say. I'm not sure, perhaps you don't have to do it that way lah, but for me, I see it that way, because someone, if you are happy with living with the current standard that you are living now, then why not, right? You just do the things that you like lah. Yeah. Okay.
What
So
about
that's.
Amos?
Oh yeah, Amos. Hey, Amos.
I don't. I. Oh shit! I think you're gonna edit this part out, cause like I don't really know.
But I think Amos is quite. I don't know. It's quite clear. It's like being a student. That's all, right? I mean, Lanai and all. It's not really.
Just
Not really.
student. I don't think like I don't. I don't think it's that notable. I'm just a student, also in a completely different field lah. But then that's. But I still find time somewhat, because like while still in training in this different field, it doesn't really take up so much time. So I still have time to do other stuff as well. So like it's not too bad lah. What's interesting is Gary lah. Gary, I don't know how he managed to find time doing all this. That one, Gary is the abnormal one here.
And Gary is always there.
Yeah.
Well,
it's not just now, It's not just now, because like he's been like that since I don't know when lah. Like even
last year.
Back in Sem 5, right? Back in degree. Wow, he already got time to do all this, and I was like, what the shit?
No lah. I mean, for me, I think it's more obvious because of COVID, and then it starts like while I was working on the final project. But at the same time,
it's definitely not because of COVID. Even during when you were working for I don't know if I can say this or not, when you were working for ZLG. Yeah. When you work at ZLG, you work so hard. You're supposed to work part-time, but you work like 6 days a week anyway. And then if it's when you're not doing that, then you're working on our own little XYZ projects, competition lah. And then and then on the weekends that you are not doing anything, then you come and then you do carpentry lah, or then do some pavilion lah, and then like I had no idea lah actually how you do.
I must say is the priority lah. I mean, for me, if you can see very obvious that my priority always put on the podcast and events, and then you see my final year project is like going nowhere. It's like cracking here and there. So I think it's always a priority, and it's all about allocation of the time, where you know that weekend is for the fun part, the XYZ part, and then the weekdays for the work, right? For what you paid for the fee, and then where you earn your living and stuff. So I I don't know. Perhaps that could be a new thing. So I'm not sure, Queenie, from your teaching experience, do you know any students also work in that way? Do you encourage them to, do competition, do things outside the assignment?
Oh, actually, a lot of my students are already practicing as interior designers because they already have their diploma, and then now they're in their degree, but they are already like working on their own like freelance interior design jobs. Some of them are, not all of them. And then some of them also do participate in competitions.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a nice practice to start doing that early on.
Would you do that if you were still a student and then you would like to expand, like, you can do some interior project or commissions around, or really started like Q design earlier?
No, I started Q design during MCO as well.
Okay.
During my university in Hong Kong, it's not so much on earning, like it's not so much on job. I did organize volunteering trips to Cambodia, like as a side thing in school. Yeah, but that's like a student activity more than a job.
So it's more on like a side hobby to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, everyone. I believe that's a good close-up session for this the final episode of the March-April season, and good to see you guys here. And I hope that we can catch up again. Okay, thanks a lot, Queenie and Eevon and Amos here. Thanks a lot.
Thanks
for having me. Thanks, Eevon. Thanks, Gary. Bye.